Alice Mitchell's early life is documented primarily through census records and city directories of the late 19th century. Born November 26, 1872, she resided in a modest residential district, characterized in municipal surveys as densely populated, with mixed-income housing and limited public sanitation. Census enumeration lists the household composition, showing multiple family members, while tax and property records indicate limited property ownership. Contemporary maps locate the Mitchell family residence near industrial thoroughfares, suggesting routine exposure to urban noise and transient populations. Local school registers record sporadic attendance, though gaps exist, and there is no surviving evidence of formal schooling completion. Church membership rolls suggest nominal affiliation without recorded participation. The social environment, as reconstructed, reflects structural neglect common to working-class urban families of the period, with municipal oversight insufficient to track household welfare consistently. This context forms the measurable backdrop against which later institutional records must be interpreted. Institutional awareness of the Mitchell household during the late 1870s and 1880s is partially traceable through municipal and charitable records. School attendance logs indicate repeated absences, prompting occasional notes from the school board, though these were not escalated to formal intervention. Local police blotters contain sporadic mentions of disturbances in the immediate neighborhood, but no entry explicitly identifies the family. Charitable organizations and church outreach registries record visits to adjacent households for material aid. The Mitchell residence appears only intermittently, suggesting inconsistent oversight. Health department inspections of urban housing during this period were limited. Surviving inspection reports note general overcrowding in the block, but do not specifically reference the Mitchell home. Taken together, these institutional traces suggest awareness of structural precarity without systematic monitoring, leaving the household largely unexamined despite formal mechanisms theoretically in place. Surviving documentation occasionally contradicts the assumption that the Mitchell household was fully visible to institutions. Census entries show inconsistencies in reported ages and occupations of household members across successive enumerations, suggesting either recording errors or partial absence during collection. School registers indicate that Alice's presence was intermittent, yet teacher annotations fail to mark prolonged absence as critical. Charity ledgers omit consecutive months of support, leaving unclear whether aid was refused, unavailable, or unrecorded. City directories list household occupants variably, with some names appearing in one year, but absent in the next. These discrepancies imply that official records only partially capture the lived reality of the Mitchell family. The fragmentary evidence suggests a household that was repeatedly invisible to systems meant to track and support it, leaving reconstruction reliant on cross-referencing incomplete and occasionally contradictory archival sources. Escalation of documented concern begins in the mid-1890s, when surviving school reports, census notes, and occasional police records intersect. Attendance sheets show prolonged absence by Alice Mitchell, triggering teacher marginal notes suggesting parental neglect, though formal escalation was limited. Police blotters reference disturbances on the block, including reports of children unsupervised in streets, yet the reports rarely identify specific households. Charity ledgers record a brief increase in aid visits around 1896, including provision of clothing and food, but documentation indicates these interventions were inconsistent and intermittent. City directories and census updates reveal that household composition remained fluid, complicating institutional tracking. Each paper trail evidences a slow accumulation of concern, with no single record indicating a coordinated effort or enforcement action, leaving the pattern of neglect partially visible but largely unresolved in the archival record. Institutional intervention, when it occurred, appears to have arrived too late to alter the trajectory documented in prior records. School inspectors' notes from 1897 reference concern for repeated absenteeism and suggest home visits, yet no corresponding follow-up reports survive. Police records indicate a single minor incident involving neighborhood children, but do not link it to the Mitchell household. Charity organizations report intermittent aid, but ledger entries show gaps that imply visits were irregular or incomplete. Municipal health inspections noted block-level overcrowding, but no individualized enforcement is recorded. Collectively, the archival evidence indicates that formal mechanisms for oversight were either delayed, misapplied, or inadequately recorded, leaving the household largely unmonitored at moments when intervention might have had measurable impact. Official responses following documented concerns were limited and largely procedural. School boards recorded absenteeism and recommended home visits, but surviving correspondence indicates no enforcement beyond notation. Police documentation reflects minor neighborhood disturbances without escalation to child welfare authorities. Municipal records show health inspections noting overcrowding, yet no targeted follow-up or citations are recorded for the Mitchell residents. Charitable organizations continued intermittent aid, but reports reveal no sustained case management. The archival record portrays a fragmented bureaucratic response. Multiple institutions were aware in varying degrees, yet no coordinated action emerges. Procedural steps were logged, yet their implementation was incomplete, reflecting systemic limitations in monitoring and intervention for households with recurring signs of neglect. The historical residue of the Mitchell case is evident in the archival record's incompleteness. Census sheets, school logs, and charity ledgers leave gaps in household composition and daily routines. Police and municipal reports note block-level issues without household-specific outcomes. Surviving correspondence and inspection notes frequently end without recorded action, leaving procedural follow-through ambiguous. Cross-referencing documents reveals inconsistencies in names, dates, and attendance patterns, creating uncertainty about the degree and timing of neglect. The evidence establishes patterns without confirming causality or intent. Archival material preserves fragments of oversight, intervention, and social context. But it also makes clear what was unrecorded, the lived experience of Alice Mitchell and her family, and the precise points where institutional systems failed or succeeded. These silences define the limits of historical reconstruction. Surviving school, municipal, and charitable records from the late 1890s document the Mitchell household in a state of continued instability. Alice Mitchell, then in her mid-20s, is recorded sporadically in adult census entries, with occupation listed variably or omitted entirely. School records for younger siblings had ceased, leaving gaps in oversight. Charity records indicate minimal engagement, with aid delivered irregularly and without follow-up. Police logs for the area note persistent neighborhood disorder, but do not link incidents to the family specifically. Health inspection notes continue to record block-level overcrowding, but individual household conditions remain undocumented. The archival evidence conveys a persistent lack of sustained monitoring, leaving patterns of neglect partially observable but largely unresolved in detail, and illustrating systemic limitations in institutional continuity at the close of the 19th century. Court and legal records from the late 1890s provide sparse evidence of formal intervention regarding the Mitchell household. Surviving filings indicate only minimal contact with local magistrates, generally limited to routine civil filings or neighborhood complaints unrelated directly to Alice Mitchell. No arrest records or formal child welfare proceedings have been located. Legal documentation is primarily procedural, reflecting the operations of local courts rather than active case management. Marginal annotations in some dockets suggest awareness of absentee or transient households, yet follow-up is absent. These records underscore the limited legal footprint of the family, demonstrating that even with systemic presence, the household left few traces in the judicial record, further complicating reconstruction of institutional response or neglect. Surviving hospital and medical records for the period provide limited insight into the Mitchell household's health and welfare. Local infirmary registers indicate occasional visits by unidentified members of the neighborhood, but Alice Mitchell herself does not appear in patient admission logs. Municipal public health reports record block-level concerns, including reports of unsanitary conditions and minor infectious outbreaks, yet individual households are rarely specified. Pharmacy and apothecary purchase logs for the area exist, but no entries clearly correspond to the family. These archival gaps highlight both the limitations of medical oversight in working-class urban districts and the difficulty of tracing health outcomes for households that did not formally enter institutional care. Documentation is fragmentary, preserving only the shadow of public health awareness rather than concrete individual intervention. Contemporaneous newspaper coverage of the Mitchell household and surrounding neighborhood is minimal and largely indirect. Local papers from the 1890s note block-level disturbances, occasional reports of unsupervised children, and sporadic municipal inspections, but no article names Alice Mitchell or her family specifically. Social columns and charitable society notices mention aid distributions in the area, but do not track individual households. Surviving clippings illustrate selective reportage, emphasizing incidents deemed newsworthy rather than systematic conditions. The fragmentary record demonstrates that public awareness of household neglect was largely mediated by broader neighborhood patterns, leaving individual experiences undocumented. Newspapers, therefore, serve as partial evidence of environment and institutional attention, but cannot be relied upon to reconstruct specific events affecting the Mitchell family. By the final years of available records, the Mitchell household remains partially traceable yet unresolved within archival systems. Census records from 1898 list Alice Mitchell with few specifics regarding occupation or household composition. Charity and municipal documents show intermittent engagement, with block-level observations continuing but individualized oversight absent. Police blotters and court dockets contain procedural notations but no substantive enforcement. Hospital and health records preserve block-level health data without identifying family members. Across institutions, gaps and contradictions persist, leaving unanswered questions about daily life, intervention timing, and outcomes. The historical residue, therefore, reflects both the presence and absence of formal systems, illustrating the partial visibility of a household consistently on the margins of late 19th century urban oversight. Alice Mitchell's death on March 31, 1898, is recorded in municipal death registers, yet surviving documentation provides minimal context regarding preceding circumstances. The official register lists age, date, and place of death, but does not record cause in detail. Obituaries, if any existed, have not been located in surviving newspaper archives. Charity, municipal, police, and health records from the preceding years offer no follow-up or commentary regarding her passing. The archival trail ends with formal notation, leaving open questions regarding family continuity, social support, and institutional involvement at the time of death. The historical record thus closes with procedural acknowledgement rather than substantive detail, reflecting the limitations of institutional documentation for households on the periphery of late 19th century urban oversight. Even in the presence of institutions, schools, courts, charities, and municipal authorities, systemic gaps and inconsistent oversight can leave lives partially invisible. Alice Mitchell's case shows that neglect is not always individual, but often a failure of social systems, and that sustained attention is necessary to prevent repeated oversight failures.